Bob McKenzie's latest book is Everyday Hockey Heroes, Volume 2, along with Jim Lang. More inspiring stories about our great game. And Bob joins us from Toronto this afternoon for him, morning for us out here in the West. G'day, Bob. How are you, sir?
Excellent, fellas. How you doing today?
Hey, great. We're great. We got a lot of questions, not only from us, but for our viewers, too, for you. But I'll start with the obvious one. Your latest book is out. It's always a great feeling, isn't it? What has you excited about the latest Everyday Hockey Heroes?
Well, I'm really proud of the work that Jim Lang, myself, the editor, Sarah St. Pierre, put into this. We did Everyday Hockey Heroes Volume 1 a couple of years ago. It was very successful. And I like the stories, and I think there are stories for today's hockey, if you want to say that. They're set against the backdrop of hockey. They're about people who have a great passion for the game, but they're oftentimes not people necessarily well known. And they are, in some instances, people who felt like they maybe were being pushed away from the game or excluded from the game or being marginalized by the game. And they managed to work their way back through it. And so there's issues of race in here. There's issues of LGBTQ and transgender. There's just a lot of issues of diversity and inclusiveness that I think we all need to continue to work on. But at the end of it, there's a common denominator there, and that is an unbelievable, unbridled passion for the game of hockey and how it pushes people back to the game, even after sometimes the games push them away.
Yeah, you want to talk about national fabric. This is it. But is there one story in there that you thought, people got to hear this story? Is there one that stands out?
Well, I think honestly, it's hard to pick just one. But since I wrote the first chapter, I'll focus on that for a moment. It's called Black and White. And, I was thinking last fall, what signature chapter am I going to write for the book? And I started thinking a little bit about where I grew up, Scarborough, Ontario. I was born in 1956. I grew up in a Scarborough that was quite white. And that is to say, when I played minor hockey in Scarborough in the 60s and the 70s, there weren't very many players of color at all. But there were a couple. And there's two in particular that I remembered. And I remembered them for a variety of reasons. Number one, because they were black in a mostly white game. That was obvious. To suggest otherwise would be silly. Number two, they were very good players. Like, I was below average. Trust me, I was way below average. But these guys were way above average. They were real good players. I also remember them because one of them was in Pee Wee, was probably like about 6'2", 6'3", a tall, gangly kid, but really talented. The other one was shorter and much more powerful, but unbelievably athletic. And the third reason I remember them is because of their names, Terry Mercury and Lindbergh Gonzalez. Those are, names that you don't easily forget. And so I was sitting around in my home thinking about where I grew up in Scarborough. I was thinking about the issue of race in hockey. And I started thinking about those two guys, and I started wondering how much different might have their experience have been than my experience. Because we were the same age, we played against each other growing up, a lot of shared teammates, friends, schools, neighborhoods, all those sorts of things. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool or interesting to go back and talk to these guys and get their views on and compare and contrast their experiences with my experiences. And as you might expect, it was illuminating and enlightening for me. And it was probably cathartic for them in terms of, I think they probably felt like they needed to get some things off their chest, and they did. And the subject, the chapter is called Black and White, and that really is the difference between their experience and mine.
Okay, I'm getting it now because I called up an email here from a guy that said, hey, Rod, last week, Howie Meeker and Alex Trebek are getting all the plaudits. Jim Nielsen passed away, too, the big chief from Big River. You got to tell his story. Like, you get it, right? It snatched from his parents' arms, put into foster care in Saskatchewan, goes on to play with the New York Rangers for 17 seasons. So there's another one. So, Bob, I mean, if you're affecting change in race and hockey for the better, man, that could be your legacy, man.
Well, it's not my legacy, but listen, if it were, that would be great. But I think we all need just to try and make our own corner of the world a little bit better. There's a real common theme that runs in a lot of these stories. Hey, listen, don't get me wrong. You want a story about the old-fashioned hockey values of dedication, commitment, sacrifice, teamwork and showing up to work every day, being the consummate pro. We've got a great chapter there on Andrew Cogliano and how his Ironman streak and the values that he has and exhibits, both on the ice and off the ice, took him to what should have been maybe an Ironman record that got taken away from him because he got suspended, not because he was injured or sick. So there's lots of that. But there's also another common theme that runs there, and that is, in some instances, there are people who want to be part of the game. They love the game so much, and for one reason or another, usually because they're different, they get pushed away from the game. There's a story by a guy by the name of Joey Gale, and he was a closeted gay teenager who didn't feel comfortable playing hockey in Minnesota because of the homophobic language and some of the attitudes. And he felt pushed away from the game, so he left hockey. Now, he went off to university, and while he was at university, he decided to come out and let his family and friends know that he was gay. And then he decided, you know what, I really love hockey. I want to go back and play. So he started playing in a men's league, and he showed up to play in with his team. And he knew then, because he was out, he needed to make some sort of statement. So the statement he made was putting his pride tape, the rainbow-colored tape, that's a symbol of the LGBTQ community, on his stick, and went to the dressing room and put it there. And somebody said, hey, what's with the gay tape? And he says, well, that's because I'm gay. And what he found was he was embraced and warmly welcomed by his team. The attitudes with the group of players that he was with were far, far different than the ones that he had when he was a teenager and he was living a life that he wasn't happy with. And it's just a tremendous story of how a guy felt pushed away and marginalized by the hockey culture, but then was welcomed back into it because he took the steps necessary to make himself also feel more welcome and changed his teammates' opinions of how to react to something like that that's quote unquote different.
Great stuff. So Everyday Hockey Hero is available wherever you buy books, and I think we're going to be spending a lot of time indoors this winter, Bob. So I know my winter plans, along with Duthie's books, are already made. But, go back to Legacy for a second. Yours is made. The original insider, the dean of insiders in hockey. So the hockey guys, and I think, as you know, I spent 17 years in the Western League. My dad in the NHL for 26 years. The hockey guys say Bob McKenzie had the insiders because he came up through junior and he kept those friendships and relationships that just transferred over into the NHL. Is that true? Are those guys right when they say that?
I think so. I mean, now that I'm semi-retired, the two things I'm most responsible for still in terms of a working life, the World Junior Hockey Championships and the NHL draft. So I get to do a lot of the stuff. Listen, I'm the same as you in terms of coming up through the ranks. In 1978, I got a job at the Sioux Star, working for a summer job there. That was the summer that Wayne Gretzky and Craig Hertzberg left the Sioux Greyhounds to go to the WHA. I was working in the news that summer, but I got to do 2 weeks of sports that summer. And it was during one of those 2 week periods was when Hertzberg and the Baby Bulls left. So I got to talk to Alan Eagleson and Bill Waters and interview Craig Hertzberg and all these guys. So I was hooked on that point. And then I got a full-time job at the Sioux Star. And the reason I got my full-time job at the Sioux Star is because a guy left when I was finishing up my Ryerson journalism degree. The Sioux Star said, we'll hire you full-time, but somebody has to leave in order to do that. And so there was a guy that left the Sioux Star sports department to work in aviation in Winnipeg. And his name was Rob Stone. And so he took off and I got his job. Now, Rob Stone, amongst other things, went to Winnipeg, worked in aviation. Oh, and he had a couple of kids named Mark and Michael, and they ended up making the National Hockey League. So I played slow pitch in the Sioux with Robbie back in that summer of '78, and then I took his job the year after he left and went to Winnipeg. So it all worked out well for all of us.
No kidding. Well, everything happens for a reason. I firmly believe that, Bob. But the interesting thing is your roles you're going to stay involved with are World Juniors and the draft, as you just said, and that's closely tied into junior hockey and, of course, your rankings and everything. Are you always going to do that, A, and B, do you do it because you love the junior side of the game so much?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I also like the fact that with things like the draft and the draft rankings and with things like the World Juniors, if you're going to be, quote unquote, semi-retired, there's a start time and a finish time. I know exactly what days, what weeks I'm working of the year. on those particular projects. Well, when you're the hockey insider and you've got to watch every game and try to know every trade and every signing and every hiring and firing and what have you, it becomes a bit life consuming. So now that I'm 64 years old and I want to slow down, it was perfect for me to stay involved at TSN with the World Junior Championships for the next 5 years, with the draft rankings for the next 5 years, chip in on a few other things on like free agent frenzy day and trade deadline day. But to your point, for me, when I think of junior hockey, I think about the guys who covered it when I was coming up. So in the Ontario Hockey League, a guy by the name of John Herbert used to be he was the top writer at the London Free Press. Everybody wanted to be like Herbie. And Morris Delacosta, and then in the Western Hockey League, Greg Drinnan and Robbie Vanstone and all those guys. And I feel like all those guys are pals, and I'm honored to have covered junior hockey and been a part of it.
Well, that's with this show. I can't believe the numbers and the response when we do junior hockey coverage. Junior A, major, junior, whatever. It's Western Canada. They love it. And on that vein, from our producer, Clark, he wanted your take on Connor Bedard because he's coming to play here. I mean, we're in the Bermuda Triangle of the NHL, I call it, right in the middle of Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Calgary. In Regina Sask, we got Connor Bedard coming. And because you've covered McDavid and Tavares and now Shane Wright, Connor's the first in the Western Hockey League, Bob. So what can we expect? What can he expect for pressure and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's funny because the exceptional status thing has been a controversial thing for a lot of years. And quite frankly, a lot of people wondered if there ever would be anybody from the Western Hockey League that gets that status. But you know what? I think as much as it's exceptional, it has happened more and more over time, and people have gotten used to it, and they've understood the connotations of exceptional doesn't necessarily guarantee a player is going to be the best player in the National Hockey League, though when you look at some of the guys that have done it, including Connor McDavid and John Tavares, amongst others, certainly that opportunity presents itself. I've not had an opportunity to see Connor play live. I look forward to it. Everything I've heard about him is absolutely outstanding, such a skilled guy. And it's interesting to see the transition for a quote-unquote exceptional player in the Western Hockey League, because it's primarily been something that's been an Ontario thing, to some degree a Quebec thing. And I think, some players are just ready for it. And from all accounts, there's no question Bedard fits into that category.
Just a couple more minutes, Bob. I'm going to rapid fire through some of the questions from our viewers. And one was from Nelson. He wanted to know how you maintain relationships being an insider, because I'll be honest with you, I don't dig for info. I'll put out a scoop, but I'd rather just sit here and talk and leave the heavy lifting to you guys and when the CFL, Farhan and Naylor, because it pisses people off. I don't want to do it. How have you done it for so long?
I don't know. I think just over time you evolve relationships. I mean, when I started covering junior hockey, to your point, I mean, a lot of the guys that were just starting out as, well, hey, listen, I ran into Kenny Holland at an AHL All-Star game in Binghamton back in the day. And, all of a sudden Kenny Holland ends up being the architect of the Detroit Red Wing dynasty, or certainly big part of it, now in Edmonton. And so you just get to know people and being in the rinks and being there. And a lot of us kind of just grew up in the game together. So it becomes easier to establish those relationships and over time. And then after you get a reputation and people know who you are, it's a little easier to get your call answered than when you cold call somebody you've never met before because they feel like they know you. But really a lot of it is just hey, what's the best part of going to a rink? Going to the scouts room or the press room before the game and having a coffee and a donut with the scouts or the hockey people, and that's where you get to know people. And once you get to know people, then everybody likes to talk. And it's a good thing in hockey some of them have loose lips, otherwise we'd be out of a job.
I know. Well, I've been saying it for 5 years. I don't go to junior games expecting to see a fight anymore. I go to visit with the scouts and with my friends. Gregory Lee wants to know, what are the odds Lafreniere will play in the World Juniors this year?
Well, I think everything depends on what's the start date for the NHL. Is it going to be January 1st? Are the training camps going to open in mid-December? We don't know yet. We're still waiting to hear on that. So I think everything on that kind of depends on, if we find out that the NHL is not starting until February 1st, the New York Rangers may be inclined to say, yeah, you know what, let's let them go back to the camp here in Red Deer. Let's put him in the tournament. But I will say this. I believe that the New York Rangers and Alexis Lafreniere have basically decided he's done with junior hockey, including the World Junior Championship. I'm not closing the door 100% to it, but I'd be very surprised, unless we get a real late NHL start date, that we see Lafreniere in this tournament. Now, it's interesting, though, the Chicago Blackhawks, of course, everybody knows Saskatoon Blades talk, Kirby Dach has been released to go to the camp here that's going to open in Red Deer in the next week or so. There's a guy that played the full year in the National Hockey League last year. Now, the Hawks did put in that little proviso about depending on the dates, and we still have to see how all that will unfold for the NHL. But all things being equal, Kirby Dach's going to be on Team Canada this year, so that's pretty cool.
Last one from Chris Bird, and I think we only have a minute. Bob, how do you see the effect of the current situation of minor hockey in Southern Ontario affecting the junior leagues?
Well, I mean, right now, hey, listen, everybody's trying to make their way. They're trying to do it safely. We want some degree of normalcy, but you don't want to push the envelope too hard because you don't want the hospitals to be overwhelmed. You don't want people to get sick and, in some cases, deathly ill. So everybody's just got to try to do the right thing. And, they're trying to find their way and get games played. And I feel bad for teenage kids that just want to go out and play hockey and they can't do it, or at least not to the same degree that they could before. But I mean, the OHL is no different than the WHL right now. They're trying to get things back on track. And I know the OHL is hoping to open camp in the middle of January and with a early February start date. And that would make me happy because my son's the general manager and head coach of the Kitchener Rangers. And as much as I miss watching NHL games right now, I miss watching his games even more.
No kidding. It's different. It's fun. I always say perfectly imperfect. It's my favorite level of hockey because there's not so many mistakes, but you know what I mean. It's not the NHL structured perfect game. Bob, this long time coming. I appreciate it. Thanks for all you've done for hockey media, and I'm glad that you can work at your pace. You've deserved it, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Really appreciate having me on and promoting the book. Thanks a lot.
You bet. Thank you, Bob. Bob McKenzie, his book, Everyday Hockey Heroes, Volume 2 is available now. And I think I'm going to very much enjoy this throughout the Christmas holidays because I do see a lot of immobilization coming here as the weather gets colder. I think I'm going to go a chapter a day through his book, Duthie's book, Howard Stern's book, Kiprios's book. Everybody's got a book.
Everybody's got a book.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.